Taylor is with us. Hey, you. How you doing?
Hey,
How are you? How you feeling?
good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you? How you doing? How you feeling?
Nah, you know,
Yeah. 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 I know. I know. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like a pile of emotional schmutz. I had a dream last night that I got bit in the ass by a shark.
Wow. So you've been having some intense pregnancy dreams.
I was swimming in the intercoastal,
Wow.
so I had to have really been on one because, like, would I really jump in the intercoastal and swim, guys?
Wow. So you're bit in the ass by a shark.
A baby shark.
A baby shark. Oh, that's interesting. A baby. You know, that little baby that you're carrying is kind of biting you in the ass.
He
You
really,
know, she's like, I take that. Ow.
yeah, giving me a run for my money. It has to be a girl.
Yep.
Just has to.
Yep. Hey, don't take it out on her when she arrives, though. No.
I hope she doesn't take it out of my nipples.
Baby shark on the nipples. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of breast
Yeah.
milk. Well, that's a good segue.
Absolutely.
Shall we? All right. So, Anoki, if you could monitor what's happening on Facebook, and if any questions or whatever come up there, let me know. It's just hard for me to watch both at the same time.
I'm
Awesome.
pulling it up right now.
Thank you, sweetie.
I just have slow connection, so bear with me, but I'll be monitoring.
Thank you. All right. So, for folks who are just joining us, welcome to Wildflowers Live. I am always joined by my co-host Taylor Callahan, and we are going to get into it. Taylor, you want to introduce yourself, sweetie?
Hello, everyone. Taylor Callahan. I am a dear friend of Patty's who literally forced her to be my friend years ago. Uh,
That is a funny
today,
story. Yep.
it is. We'll have to tell that. That'll be my story in your next book.
Yes.
Yeah, I threw an apron on and took over the kitchen. Absolutely no reason. Today we're working on a story. It's actually the first story in Patty's book, and it is titled Weighty Matters. This one struck me for a multitude of reasons. You know, there are so many people that are born in a traumatic way, that go through traumatic things before they have a recollection of memory.
Yeah.
And don't understand how it affects them in adulthood. Something as simple as losing the choice to breastfeed, how you come into the world. That was something that, as a mother, I had to really advocate for my children, because I was really young when I started having kids, and I saw that I was manipulated and my births were manipulated, and it affected not only how I was able to mother, but it affected how my little ones came earthside. And so by my third, I put my foot down and I was like, to hell with doctors and medical advice. I'm going to take control of the way that I birth and try and release some of the fear associated with that. I think it's important that you do that. But back when you were born, they didn't. They were still telling shut their legs, you know, and doctors still don't listen today. I mean, even this pregnancy, I have really had to rally and fight to find a doctor who was willing to allow me to birth naturally after having cesareans, and actually had a doctor tell me that he wished more mothers advocated this way for their births. It was reassuring. But your story starts a lot like that. Your story starts with, you know, a doctor telling your mother, cross your legs, squeeze together.
I was arriving too fast.
But ready to come, and you were literally halted.
Yeah. And they kind of put up a detour. And they won't do that anymore. So a lot of things that happened back then are unthinkable today.
I mean, and this wasn't that many years ago. So just think how far we've come. They're not, you know, shoving powdered milk or skim milk into mothers' faces to give to their children today, but they're really quick to supplement formula. even when you declare, don't give my kid formula,
Mhm.
happens even before you leave the hospital. And, the pediatricians will still say, your kid's not getting enough breast milk and you need to supplement, or quite the opposite, like, your child is gaining weight too fast. You should, change your formula and stop giving so much breast milk.
I know, I agree. And hello, Alicia. Thank you for joining us this morning. We were just talking about doctors and birth and breast milk. No, I agree. And I also think this had to do with being a little baby girl, that this choice was
Yeah.
made. So I was a little, and we had a fun conversation yesterday, Taylor and I, talking about, we'll get into that. So I was a very, very healthy child. I was born, I think I was like 8 pounds, 14 ounces. Even in womb, my behavior was a little odd because I kicked a lot. And back then, if you kicked a lot, they had these notions. It was like my father already had this fantasy of having a football son. Like they really thought they were going to have a son. So already in their mind, right? They're having a son, and my father's thinking football player, right? So, I'm born, and I'm this little girl. Well, not so little, and I am gaining weight very quickly on my mother's milk. And so, 2 months in, 2 months, the doctor says, she's gaining weight too fast. And so we need to put her on skim milk. Now, back then, skim milk was not what you buy in the store. You didn't go and get a carton of it. It was Carnation's instant milk. You added water to it. And so this wonderful fatty breast milk that I was getting the first 2 months of my life was now switched out for, I think that there's a lot of sugar in instant Carnation's milk. I don't even know if it's even still available, but it's awful shit, but at any rate, I was switched to that. And the doctor actually thought my mother was lying. He thought that she was not taking his orders because I continued to gain weight. But the thing is that I believe now, that I continue to gain weight because they were giving me this freaking, why not just fill up my bottle with Coca-Cola at that point? Because it was like, I think of instant carnation milk as kind of almost as bad in terms of its sugar content. So that's kind of what happened to me. And I kind of joke about the trauma of that, and I think that I have kind of lived with the trauma of that experience at 2 months old. And so how that's looked in terms of like even my eating habits, it's like I have a fear of going hungry. Did you want to say anything more about your own breastfeeding experiences, Taylor?
Well, ironically enough, I was exclusively breastfed for the first year of my life. Chose not to do it completely sober.
So you were drunk most of the time, basically.
I was a pretty drunk baby. But I will never forget my first son home and my mother looking at me. We were going to have some beers that evening, and I started pumping my breasts for milk to feed my child while I had a beer. And my mom thought it was hysterical. She was laughing hysterically and said, like, "Are you kidding? Do you know what you were raised on?" And I'll never forget that because, it was like such a hoot to her that I was not going to drink. I was going to drink this Corona and then throw away my breast milk. But I have exclusively breastfed all three of my children, hopefully four. I would not allow a doctor to say to me, "Hey, your kid's gaining too much weight." I read something, especially if it was a female.
Yes.
And so I'll say this. I read something recently that spoke about the BMI of women.
Mm-hmm.
BMIs were created for white men. They are not meant for women.
That makes so much sense. I just want to say hello, John, on Facebook. Nice to see you, sweetie. And that's interesting because a lot of the studies on a whole lot of things are, the researchers are 30-something-year-olds, white researchers in Ivy League colleges. And that really does leave out a whole lot of the world's population. So yes, women, people of color, all kinds of things. But yeah, the doctor really thought that I was gaining weight too fast, and I do not think that that decision would have been made if I was a boy. And the thing too is my parents were pretty conservative about those kinds of things too, very into what a girl should look like, what a girl should act like, and I broke all those rules. So I didn't really look like a girl from the time I was born. I was bigger, and even in the womb, I kicked more than a girl should kick. So my father thought he was getting a little football player. And here's the funny thing. I did play football with the neighborhood boys. I was the only one in my family who played football with the neighborhood boys. My two brothers did not. I did. And I turned out to be really, really athletic. I was very athletic. I played softball, I played soccer, I was in the different sports. But what was interesting is my parents never came to any of my games. They went to my brother's games, but not so it was not really encouraged to be this sporty girl. So it was kind of a sense right from the beginning with my body, what my body looked like and how my body was, that there was a sense of otherness. And in Weighty Matters, in the story Weighty Matters, we really do get into this whole sense of otherness, that kind of involved more than just my body, but how I was in the world and how I saw myself in the world, and where I felt most at home. And it really wasn't in my family. It was, and some of this is kind of funny. So I was going to just share something. Did you want to add to that, Taylor, before I jump into this?
I just think that is a very important aspect for so many young people who don't understand why they're different, or they understand early on in their familial relationships that they are the black sheep, and where they fit into the grand scheme of things. I think that it's so important, that otherness that we talk about, for it to be recognized, and for young people to know and hear, conversations like this, that is so normal, and it's so okay. I mean, I was different for other reasons growing up, but I always knew it. It. It's an innate knowing.
Sure. Yeah, you were an only child too, and you knew it. Sometimes we have this sense because we are different from our siblings, like that was my experience, but you had that experience as an only child, which is really interesting. Like that knowing.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't even look at it like that, but that's a really good point. I noticed it with my peers. I wasn't the same as the kids I went to school with. I was very different from my friends. They were being raised very differently, things like that. And so the older I got, the more different that otherness really pulled me away from, my peers. So it's very relatable for me. And I think that it's a very important conversation for young people. Even in today's world, there's so many different othernesses, for lack of better terminology. And it's important to embrace that. Those are gifts, but we don't realize it when we're kids. We want to be the same.
Yeah, I agree. It's something to be celebrated. Someone's absolute uniqueness, coming into the world. Well, they're different, they're different, and so to approach it almost as a curiosity. What are they going to do today? What are they going to say today? What are they going to think today? What are they going to share today that is really unique and unusual. Let's hear it. And I think like at you as a parent, that's what you do, because you have these amazing sons and they're all very, very unique in their own way. And you approach your mothering to them with a kind of a sense of curiosity and adventure. It's like, you know, like Phoenix is an adventure in and of himself. And so has every child that you have brought into the world, is that they are an adventure unto themselves. Let's see where they're going to go. Let's see where they're going to take us. And to approach it like that, as opposed to, how will this child potentially embarrass me? And I think a lot that is kind of what I've always felt. And to this day, there is a sense that my family members, or my, my family members are always bracing themselves for, how might Patti embarrass us with this? And I think even my memoir, to be honest with you, even my memoir was like, oh, we're really kind of glad you're doing that. Okay, that sounds good. But there was a sense of like, oh God, will she embarrass, how gay is she going to be in this memoir?
And gayness is such a big one. Gayness is such a big one. I mean, we've had this conversation times, and reassuring conversations. You're putting this book out.
Yeah.
This is for you, not for them.
Nope.
It's not about them.
Mm.
But gayness is such a big one.
It is.
Because, as a child, for the most part, we all know early on, like, wow, really feeling something here. And it be the same sex, and it immediately, especially growing up in a religious background like you did, Catholic
and Baptist. I had, my father is Baptist and my mother's Catholic.
Worse.
I had the double whammy there.
Yes, you had to go to 2 different churches on Sunday.
I did. I ran away. Right. I ran away on Sundays. In between 9 o'clock mass and 10:30 service, I went and hid in the woods. Yeah. I couldn't take it.
And so, that aspect of embarrassment really shows face. I often joke like, oh, maybe one of my boys will be gay. I have nothing but boys. Like, maybe one of them will be super feminine.
It's because you're hoping for the femininity.
Yeah,
boys.
I would fully embrace it. But 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and so on, it was not okay. It was not normal, and it was not embraced. And damn it, you were gonna act straight when you were in this house, and it brings me to, that first moment when you realize, maybe not even realizing, but for you were laid up in a hospital bed after a bout with tetanus, and sweet affinity for your neighbor Melody. And,
it was
my read a piece of that if you'd like. Yeah,
it was the first. Did you want to read that? Do you have that there, or is that in your
first girl crush? Right?
What's that? It was the first time, and I didn't even realize what was. Yeah, I didn't even realize what was going on, but I loved her, and I had to have her in my life, and that and that didn't happen. I think my parents realized that there was something going on. So I was 9 years old. And I had ended up in the hospital because a pipe had fallen on my knee. And though I did not have a cut, an infection grew inside. And so, my father being very stubborn and anti-doctor and anti-hospital, and who knows, maybe anti-paying any money to take care of his kids. I'm not sure. But, he didn't want us to go. And I ended up running a very high fever. By the 5th day, I couldn't walk. And my mother brought me to the emergency room. I went right into the operating room, and they had to drain it. And I have the scar to this day, but I ended up spending five days in the hospital, right? And so who's my roommate? This beautiful little girl about my age. Her name was Melody, and we had a bond. And so I'll read just a little passage of that from my hospital day. But this is when it really became clear in this experience that it was really not okay for me to feel this way about other girls.
Yeah.
All right. So did you want to read it or do you want me to? I can read it.
Yes. Where should we start? Later that year, or do you want to
I
start farther down?
I didn't like the penicillin shots every 6 hours.
I didn't like the penicillin shots every 6 hours, but I liked my roommate. Melody had long, dark, curly hair, pretty brown eyes, and 2 shattered legs. Her cast covered both legs up to her waist with a bar between and an opening to relieve herself into a bedpan. I brought her extra snacks from the nursing station, and we set out our radios to the same channel so we could listen to our music in stereo. Sometimes, when Melody was in pain or sad, I sat by her bed and kept her company. On my last day in the hospital, Melody gave me her address, and I promised to write. We could still be friends. 2 days after my discharge, my letter was complete and my envelope addressed. I had poured myself into the letter, telling her how special she was to me and how I could not imagine my life without her. And I am sure I signed it with love. It was the truth. I loved her.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, and so what happened was I ended up waiting and waiting and waiting for her response, and I never got it, and realized much later that my parents never sent the letter. And it was just not something that they thought was okay.
how did you realize that, Patti? How did that come to that you understood that your mother was like, your otherness was showing?
I think it took me years. I think it took me
Did you
years
ask?
to realize, and I did not. But it was kind of comments that were made, that indicated that that was, that it was, it was, how people kind of dismiss something. Oh, well, that's and you can kind of tell that there's more going on. You can't really connect the dots at the time, but then you realize later, it's like, wow, that's what happened.
Yeah.
And I let it go, but that was the beginning of me realizing that the way that my otherness had moved from like this body that was not girly like my sisters. My sisters were very, very thin, very, very girly. They liked the dresses. They liked the ankle socks with the lace around whatever the fuck. I mean, honestly. And ruffles. I had no interest in that at all. I wanted to be in the woods. I wanted to be climbing trees. I wanted to be playing football with the boys. I wanted to go. Yeah, I wanted to be I wanted to be a forest warrior. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be out in the woods, exploring, and in my own imagination, because that was a real safe place for me. Was to be in my own imagination, out in the woods. That's where I was happiest. But then I noticed that my otherness was moving into the regions of my heart and my emotions. And now I was having these little crushes. I was feeling too strongly, like my emotions were too strong or too something. And so later on that year, I was in 4th grade, and we had a substitute teacher. I guess our teacher went on pregnancy leave and went on maternity leave, and so we had this Dutch teacher. And I call her Ms. Z, because I know her name had a Z in it, but I don't remember what it was. And I loved Ms. Z. She was phenomenal. And here is where kind of like you can kind of see a little bit of my woundedness kind of playing out even as a 9-year-old. Do you want to read maybe my sad 9-year-old?
Yes. Now this
I love this part.
It's funny because the universe was pushing at you a little bit.
Yeah.
You had read this or written this and thought that it was going to be read in private.
Mm-hmm.
But the universe said, nay, Patti.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Time for you. It's time for you to hear your own words out loud. Gain some epiphanies. Maybe my sad 9-year-old heart brought me to my next calamity. When our teacher went on maternity leave and we were sent to a visiting teacher from Holland. I do not remember her name, but I remember it had a Z, so we'll call her Miss Z. She was beautiful and kind and had lighter hair and skin than anyone I had ever seen. She told wonderful stories about her homeland and the holiday traditions. I learned that their Festival of Lights was named for a saint with my last name. She smiled at me when she told me this story. I loved Miss Z. When the time approached for her to depart, we made thank you cards with construction paper and crayons. I drew a flower on the front of my card and poured my adoration into the words on the inside. Words I thought only she would read. When Miss Z decided to read each card aloud to the class, I wanted to melt into my seat and disappear. My cheeks became hot and I stared down at my desk. When she picked up my card, I closed my eyes. She said my name and complimented the flower, then read carefully until she got to the line I dreaded the most. You are like a flower, she read. How beautiful, Patti, she said. Thank you. Tears filled my eyes and ran down my red cheeks. She may have thought my tears flowed because I would miss her. But in that moment, I cried because Miss C had accepted my love. She thought it was beautiful. And then she was gone.
That's such an emotional moment, right?
Just such a deep realization for you.
Yeah, this sharp contrast between kind of how my parents looked at my emotionality and how this particular woman did, and it was an affirmation. It was a brief affirmation, but it was nonetheless an affirmation. And I honestly think that that moment perhaps held that seed of desire to become a teacher later on. Like I wanted to do that and be that for other young people. And I think Ms. Z was perhaps my first inspiration to kind of follow that path and be that for other young people who might have felt the way I did.
This next part of the story, Patti, just my parents referred to the thickness of my body as baby fat.
Oh, okay.
And I agreed I would grow out of it in puberty. But still, the fat had to be controlled. According to the wisdom at that time, the same wisdom that took my breast milk away. Fat made people fat. My mother bought margarine and low-fat cottage cheese. I was told to remove the skin from my chicken before eating it and try using mustard instead of mayo on sandwiches, and which made you more conscious.
Yeah.
It made you more conscious of your body.
Yeah.
Because you were getting pecked at. Yeah. Always. You got pecked at a lot.
Yeah.
Because your body was true to you. You knew your body was a good body. You know, something you said to me years ago has always stuck. And that was the way that you looked down at your legs one morning before we opened the shop. And you said, I'm grateful for these legs, grateful for these feet. It was an affirmation. And you may have not even been including me in it, but I was taken aback because the things we take for granted.
Exactly.
Tell your body that you loved it and that it was a good body. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that that's why you retreated to the woods so much as a child, because in the woods, the trees in your body was good. The trees trusted your body to get up all the way to the top of the boughs and climb those branches. And so that felt good.
Mm-hmm. I really was quite conscious of my body. And yet when I was in the woods doing my, forest warrior times, I felt really good about my body. And I actually loved its strength. I loved the way it felt when I sweat. I liked the scent of my body. I liked walking in a way where I felt my own strength and my own vitality. I loved that.
It.
I did.
Until grew breast.
Yes.
Your breasts got in the way.
Well, breast changed everything.
When you said breasts were a prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I had traumatic experiences with breasts. So I'll just read this. Suddenly in the summer of my 11th year, my breast sprouted and grew, poking through my Sears undershirt. While my sisters hoped their training bras would train their bodies to grow breasts, I wanted no part of it. As far as I was concerned, my life ended when my breast showed up. My life in the woods, my life in the trees as a forest warrior, my life playing football with the boys. Breasts changed everything. At summer camp that year, a tent mate squeezed my new and tender breast as hard as she could to, quote, make sure it was real. The only punch I've ever thrown in my life was thrown at her. It was a very bad punch, by the way. I missed. Back home, back home, I was a terrible fighter. Back home, my sisters aimed poison darts. My new breast made me the enemy.
Boyish one. You weren't supposed to get boobs.
Yeah, I did. I got the boobs first, and they were pissed.
It reminds me of that movie Now and Then. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I think it was the actress that Rosie O'Donnell played. It might have been Christina Ricci. God, I love her.
Yeah, me too.
Loved her. But anyways, she duct taped her breasts.
Oh dear God.
Because she hated them.
Mm-hmm.
So she would duct tape them, like wrap them up before they would go out to play with the boys because she didn't want to deal. And that kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, I mean, so I meet Leisha. I meet Leisha Lucio, and this kind of really, really changes my perspective. So she's really such a character in my memoir. People always want to know more about her. I actually have no idea where Leisha is now, but she was really quite more of an influence than perhaps she ever realized. And at that awkward moment in my life,
she was a good friend to you.
Say that again.
She was a true friend.
She was a true friend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to read in 7th grade?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
In 7th grade, I met Lucio. Leisha had the largest breasts and the smallest waist in junior high school and sat behind me in homeroom. Most of the girls had breast hate for her. I think we can all attribute, early school days to the girl with the boobs and the envy that went along with that. I didn't. So we became friends. That's because you also had boobs, Patti. She didn't mind how awkward I was in my body. She didn't think my thighs were too big either. Leisha was comfortable in her body and wore tight jeans and V-neck shirts. I wore t-shirts and tunic tops. Boys and teachers oogled Leisha's breasts as we walked through the halls. Does that bother you? I asked. I ignore them, she said. They're idiots. Leisha had solved the breast problem. Wear what you want, do what you want. The world is full of idiots.
I was grateful for that friendship, and I think that when you really start talking about budding bodies and our relationship to our bodies, there's that moment when we begin to see ourselves and experience ourselves as sexual beings, and that is really when I realized that I was attracted to girls. I had my crushes on girls, and I was kind of going in a very different direction. So, but that didn't free me from my self-consciousness about my body.
I think partially because it had already been indoctrined into your mind and you had been conditioned at that juncture.
Yeah.
And so from that moment on, it was going to be an undoing that you were going to be responsible for.
Yeah. One of the things that was kind of disturbing that I carried from my youth and had to and I continue to deprogram it from my thinking even to this day, is the assumption that if I had been thinner, I would have attracted a man and I would have been straight. So associating my thickness to being more gay, and that if that I might have avoided the gay thing if if my body had looked a little bit more like my straight sisters. And that has been like that imprint in has been something, and it's a wound and something that I've come a long way in, but is still something that I have to be really aware of, because it still kind of comes up sometimes and I have to, catch it.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. You're thinking, you look like
I
you're
was thinking
like,
very
what?
in my head. I was very in my head.
Okay.
I'm just thinking, and it took you a long time, even though you had felt sexual at a normal age,
Mm,
early teenage years. I mean, I started my period in the 4th grade. I was the first girl that got boobs, but I kind of stunted my growth was stunted, and so that was short lived. But I was always the first one in the group that had to deal with these women problems, even though I was the
mm,
small
mm.
figured
Yeah.
thing. But even though you knew that your body felt good and that to touch and be touched, because we all get to that juncture, in puberty, it took you a long time to be sexual for the first time.
Yeah.
And don't necessarily talk about that in this book, but I think what you needed was for someone to reassure you
Mm-hmm.
that your body was fine,
Mm-hmm.
your
Yeah.
body was perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And eventually someone did come along and make that clear to you, and it's so sweet how a few words, a few kind words, can change you and stick to you
Yeah.
and hold you up for decades, to come, for a long time, for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And I
Something
honestly,
you needed to hear the day you were born.
say that again.
Something that you should have heard the day you were born.
And I honestly, I think that we do. And I think you're referring to the last part of it. And I don't know if you want to read that, just kind of finish
I
up
do.
with that. Okay. So begin. Yeah. So wherever you want to start, but yeah.
So I'm just going to start from when I made love for the first time. Is that too far up?
No, do what you want. You're fine.
When I made love for the first time in my senior year. God, Patty, you make me feel like such a hussy.
Stop.
I couldn't stop wondering what she thought about my thighs. This self-consciousness did not fade away as I grew into adulthood. It ebbed and flowed as my weight fluctuated, but never left. I was not at home in my own body. Intimate touch was conditional. You can touch me here, but not there. Not in the places I feel fat. Although I did not experience judgment or cruelty from lovers, I still made assumptions about how they perceived my body. Maybe they overlooked my physical imperfections and focused on my character, my charm, my humor, and the way I made them feel. I needed to compensate for my body. Decades passed, and one day a woman marveled at the curves of my body, cupped my breasts like precious doves, and said, "You are so beautiful and perfect." Now I'm going to cry. Damn you, Patty. Her words broke my heart open. We were not lovers for long. Perhaps those words were the sole purpose of our brief time together. We all hear those words on the day of our arrival. You are so beautiful and perfect. If we're lucky, we get reminders along the way. And if we are courageous and steadfast enough, we will believe them before we depart.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I mean, honestly, that is still an emotional part for me too. Because I think part of the breaking open of the heart is when you have one of those moments when someone acknowledges you or really, really sees you and acknowledges your beauty or acknowledges something about you that really hasn't been acknowledged. It's it's a joyful moment, but it's very painful at the same time, because in that moment you experience all the time you've had without it, all the time that has passed where you have
The
not
glass
had.
shatter.
Mhm. Mhm.
realize this, knowing that,
Hmm.
oh my God, nobody's ever said that to me before.
That's right. That's right. So I don't think that we can underestimate the impact that we have on someone. I'm not saying go out and say things you don't mean, but I'm saying when you see someone, when you really see someone, whether it's about their character, about their personality, about their body, whatever it is, if and don't hold back, you know, tell someone how beautiful they are to you and say it as often as you want and be specific and be direct and be as passionate as you want to be, because those words are life changing. Because I think, yes, it's a reassurance, but also I do believe that it is a reminder of how the creator sees us,
Yeah.
how we came into this world, and how our beingness is actually seen as beautiful and perfect. And so there's something overwhelmingly beautiful and affirming about such a moment, because I think it affirms something deeply spiritual. I think it affirms something that the soul needs, not just our emotions, not just our body, but our soul needs that affirmation as well. And so when you experience it, it is really it's kind of a cosmic experience in my opinion. So yeah, thank you for reading that.
Really. It's also important, especially when we've grown up hearing negatives about ourselves, and we've created this narrative about
Mhm.
ourselves. You've had hard childhoods. I think that no matter what, we've all had childhoods that we need to heal from.
Absolutely.
I do my best to avoid that with all my kids, but I promise you, there will come times and lessons that you cannot save your children from. If you're not creating them, they will be created so that they can learn. For us, it was childhood cancer.
Yeah.
I wish I could have saved them from that, but that was not going to happen.
Mhm.
And so, in the case of parents and others making you feel awkward in your otherness, and I say this to any young person that will listen, say it to yourself. If you're not being told by others, say it to yourself. My favorite exercise is I tell people, and I'll never forget the first time it was said to me, and I was like, what a weird self exercise to look in the mirror
Yeah.
and say, looking into your own eyes, I love you. It is so fucking hard to do.
It is hard to do.
Super awkward,
Mhm.
but so healing to be
Mhm.
able to look into your own spirit and say the things that you need to hear from others that aren't being said to you. I
Mhm.
love you. You're special. Any affirmation, but to
Mhm.
look into the mirror and say it to yourself.
Yeah.
It'll change your confidence and how you carry yourself and change that narrative.
Mhm.
So
Couldn't agree
I say
more.
that to anybody. Listen.
So I know that there are people here who have stories. I think Robin has a story, and maybe Anoki, and anyone
Yes.
else. So let's see. Robin, did you want to jump in here? Do you have some?
Sure. Um, I had questions too for you. Oh my
Please,
gosh.
please, please.
So, well, to start, when you were talking about otherness, when did you come up with that term? Looking back as an adult or like at this adolescent time?
It's not a word that I had as a child. It was a feeling that I had. You could say a
Right.
feeling that I had, that I was different. I wasn't the same as my sisters. There was always kind of this sense of being in comparison to, living that, and so the experience of being very different from my sister, and in that sense, and I call it otherness as I was writing the story all these years later. That's how I
Okay.
described it.
Yeah, because it's a complex. It was like a complex discovery of your disposition
Mm-hmm.
in the world. I think all of us are looking for where we fit in, whether it's like what job we're going to be good at when we grow up, or who our friends are going to be for our outer support system,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know. It's just you see it in the kids, especially when you look at the children now. I worked in an elementary school for a time in
Mm-hmm.
high school, and you could see the difference with the kids, where like the teachers would kind of treat them different, and
Mm-hmm.
they just had this you know alternate disposition,
Right.
we'll say, is
Yeah.
what I would kind of call it. But otherness, I loved your otherness term. Your life in the woods, that was really cool.
Mm.
As far as I was concerned, my life ended when my breast showed up.
Mm-hmm.
My life in the woods, my life in trees as a forest warrior, my life playing football with the boys, breast changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the breast envy, oh, that was good too.
Yeah, and the assumptions that girls will make and women will make. If you have big breasts, you must be a slut. How did that? How does that equate? Big. Why? How do
So
big-breasted girls? How are big-breasted girls slutty?
that's called shame,
Oh yeah.
okay? And it is something that has to be taught. There's power in sexuality.
Yeah.
Okay? You were just a blossoming little bud there. And then they're like, tape those things down, put those things away.
Breasts are sexualized. Like, I will breastfeed my kid anywhere, but women on the internet that have like giant fake breasts are like, that's disgusting. Like, you don't need to, do that in public. And I'm like,
It's become normal for breasts to be objectified. So if they're
yeah,
used for any other purpose, that's not normal. That's odd. That's weird. And so why would you breastfeed? But if you've
right,
got,
right.
double D's, you've got, you want to show those off.
Yeah.
I felt that difference growing up. Like when I was a kid, I got made fun of, like, and I didn't fit into the boy category, and I didn't fit into the girl category, and I didn't have like the girl body, but I had the girl face and hair, and I was a little tomboy, so I definitely felt like the opposite end of the like almost like persecution for not having them, and then I didn't want them, like, and so then I was just really weird,
Mhm.
like, and it just, it made it really tough, that, yeah, what did it matter, so like my little sister's generations, it doesn't matter, and that's really cool. And I was like right at that break though, where the people that I knew that were younger than me were cool, but then the people that were my age were like making fun of people still, because I think, like a lot of the anti-bullying stuff has really gotten through to people, and like suicide awareness and all of that stuff,
Yeah.
but, yeah, like I didn't know, I don't know, I didn't know my power until I knew how to love myself. And then when I finally loved myself, then all of a sudden, like the world came together, because like it didn't matter, what everybody else thought, and that was okay. And
Right.
I felt my abnormality in the world, and I felt, how abstract I was against everybody else's art, but the angle that I was looking at it all, it was okay, So when I learned that it was okay, that I thought it was okay, was when I learned, I could appreciate me, and then I could just be, and in just being, I like assumed this whole power of just me. Sometimes things break so that, new soil, they break the soil up so that you can plant new things and put new nutrients back into everything.
Well said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Would anyone else like to make a comment, share a story, ask a question?
Yeah, may I?
Absolutely, Robin.
I enjoyed the part where you described feeling and enjoying the strength and power of your body.
Mm.
Like walking home, talking about sweating and everything. I found it foreign yet empowering to my femininity to read. But I recognize the devaluation of your individuality before it even blossomed. That's why the flower analogies are so perfect for puberty.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, that's when I began to feel like a sensuous and sexual being, it was a much more earthy kind of experience for me. I felt my sensuality and my sexuality in my strength, in the feeling of my muscles under my clothes and sweat. I liked to see and feel the sweat on my body and smell, and it was a very sensuous experience for me. And I felt very sensual and sexual in my own vitality. Like there was something about that was um, very, very sensual, very sexual for me. And those were kind of my first um, experiences in that way.
I don't know, shame, when you said it was going to be on weight and sexuality, shame is just part of that, I think, for us as women in
Hmm.
the world. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like you can't talk about it without, um, I don't know, I just wasn't able to even go there without thinking about like embarrassment and shame. And especially because when we're blossoming, that's what I experienced, where I experienced that kind of shame long before I had any like weight on my body or sexuality to even know
Yes.
what that would have been,
Yes.
it's there before the flower blooms.
Yes. No, I agree. It starts really early. For me, it started very early, perhaps when I was 2 months old. Started then or before. I don't know.
It was just really empowering to read. I loved that whole description and that time in your life. It was really cool insight.
Thank you. Thank you. There's body positivity, right? And that's like this movement. And while I really embrace so much of that, I also think that we can't skip the healing. So we can't pretend that we're not wounded in these areas, and so we can't positively think our way to having a better relationship with our bodies. Like how some light workers think, well, I'm just going to think positive and it's all about love and light, and I'm just going to kind of ignore this other stuff. It's like, no, it doesn't really work that way. So in our relationship with our bodies, and certainly this has been my experience, is like I couldn't just, think positively. Oh yeah, you're beautiful no matter what. And I'm just going to keep saying that and fake it till I make it kind of thing. I had to kind of go inward and look at some of these wounds and work through them, and come to, kind of go through my own process of healing and integrate some of this stuff before I could really move into a place where I felt better, and positive about my body. I couldn't just say, like a magic wand. No, you are going to think positively about your body.
And that's always changing too, because like you can, things come back up, with old wounds, and you see them
Mhm.
from a different angle, and you got to revisit that angle and how you can heal from that, in a different way, in a way that you didn't even realize you were still wounded from, so
Absolutely.
it's good to live with your scars and appreciate the beauty of what they've provided you with, and be aware of yourself and your state and how you feel and if you're taking care of yourself or not, because your soul and spirit and body and mind, they all work together and they tell you when you need things, so it's important to listen to that and listen to, the that inner voice of your own empathy and
Mhm.
and living through feeling.
Yeah, and okay, I'm so glad you said that because it's so much of what I've discovered in so many ways is really about the importance of listening to our own inner voice. There are so many, and that's kind of what gets us a lot into trouble is listening to all of these outer voices, all of the shoulds, right? We get should on all the time. You should look like this, you should do this, you should do this, and it comes from family, it comes from friends, it comes from the media, it comes from all over the place, and it really creates a very loud, noisy world in which it's hard to hear our own inner guidance, but really when it comes down to it, that's what's going to get us to our healing process and to kind of our best life. I spent years thinking my body wasn't this enough and that enough, or too much of this and too much of that. And what I arrived at is when my soul came into this world, this is the body, this is the vehicle that was going to get the job done. Whatever the purpose is for my soul in this world, this is the body it chose. So it chose this body for its own reasons. And I have to kind of trust that this is the perfect body. This is the vehicle my soul chose. And so it was liberating to get to that point and get to the point where actually I was thinking, I have an amazing body. This body is amazing. And I think that's true for all of us. Our bodies are really the vehicle that our soul chose when it came into this life, and is the body that is ultimately going to take us on the journey that the soul intended us to be on in the first place.
It really does come down to, that little inner voice and listening and, hey, you know what? That didn't really sit well with me.
Mm-hmm.
When I ate that steak, or, when I had that burger, like that made me have energy and I felt vibrant. And so, listening to our body, even if it goes against the grain of
the outer voices,
beliefs, your the should-ons,
Yeah.
I love
the should. This is always such a wonderful time. I really enjoy these on Sundays. And Taylor, you're going to have to tell us what are we diving into next week?
Tasting the ocean.
Oh, okay. If you haven't bought the book yet, Wildflowers and Present Tenses, the best way to buy it is on PattiLuciaWrites.com. You get 15% off. And so visit anytime. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us for Wildflowers. As you can see, we get a little wild, but that's the whole point, because we are wildflowers ourselves. Wildflowers do not grow comfortably in backyards and in little neat pots. They grow best in wide open fields and forests, and that is who we are, and that's what we celebrate on this live stream. And as always, it is such a pleasure, such a joy to spend this time with you guys. I look forward to next week when we dive into tasting the ocean.